Everyone ignored the injured wolf pup until the Omega saved it and the king saw. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive right into today's story. What if the fate of an entire kingdom could depend on the actions of a single Omega and a forgotten wolf pup? Well, in the kingdom of Aldora, that's exactly what happened. In the heart of this mystical and powerful land, where magic and mystery intertwine with everyday life, a young Omega named Lian was trying to make sense of a world that didn't care for her. You see, Omegas like Lian were often ignored, overlooked, and considered unimportant by the people of Aldora. They were seen as weak, as lesser beings, not worthy of attention or respect. But deep in the wild forests surrounding the kingdom, something extraordinary was about to happen. One day, as Lian wandered through the dense woods, she stumbled upon an injured wolf pup, barely alive, lying helplessly by the side of the trail. Its fur was matted with blood, its eyes glazed with pain. It was clear that the pup had been abandoned, left to die by whatever had attacked it. The moment she saw the little creature, something stirred inside Lian. She couldn't just walk away. She couldn't let it suffer. Despite the harsh judgment she faced from others in her village, Lian took the pup in her arms, promising herself that she would do everything in her power to save it. She brought the wolf pup back to her humble cottage, her hands trembling as she carefully bandaged its wounds and used her healing magic to ease its pain. The villagers, including General Zarek, saw her actions as nothing more than a fool's errand. To them, the pup was just another wild animal, not worth the time or effort. They mocked her for wasting her energy on something so insignificant. But Lian wasn't swayed. She could feel the pup's heart beating, its fragile life hanging on by a thread. As the days passed, the pup slowly began to heal under Lian's care, growing stronger with each passing moment. Lian was determined to see it through, no matter what the world thought. But little did she know, this wolf pup, whose life she had saved, was not just any ordinary animal. It was Fenris, a mythical wolf, destined to play a key role in the kingdom's future. And while Lian cared only for the pup's survival, destiny had much bigger plans for them both. One afternoon, as Lian was tending to Fenris, something unexpected happened. King Kale, the ruler of Aldora, arrived at the outskirts of the village. He was inspecting the borders when he caught sight of the Omega kneeling by the injured wolf. The sight of her, an Omega, tending to such a creature piqued his curiosity. King Kale, known for his cold and calculating nature, didn't usually bother with trivial matters. But something about Lian and her care for the wolf made him pause. The king's eyes narrowed, not out of suspicion, but something deeper, curiosity, perhaps. What was it about this Omega that seemed different from all the others? Why did she care so much for a mere wolf pup? But before he could ask, he turned and walked away, as if to dismiss the situation entirely. Yet, in the back of his mind, the image of Lian and the pup lingered. Little did he know, his destiny, and that of his kingdom, was now tied to the actions of this lone Omega and the mysterious wolf she had saved. Let's return to Lian. After all, she was the one who had dared to defy the odds and save Fenris, not knowing the true significance of the creature she had taken under her wing. As time passed, Lian's care for Fenris grew deeper. She had never felt such a strong connection with any creature before. Each day, the wolf pup grew stronger, its energy returning little by little. The bond they shared became undeniable. Lian often spent hours sitting beside Fenris, watching it play and run around in the meadow near her home. Though the villagers continued to ignore her and the pup, something inside her felt at peace. She had saved this creature, and in doing so, she had found a sense of purpose. Yet, despite the quiet beauty of her everyday life, the kingdom was on the brink of a major shift. Rumors of mysterious forces gathering at the borders of Aldora spread like wildfire. Whispers spoke of a growing darkness, one that could only be defeated by the power of the ancient beings hidden in the forests. Lian knew nothing of these events, but the growing tension was inescapable. Then, one fateful day, As Lian tended to Fenris by the river, a shadow appeared overhead. The sun was blocked out for a brief moment, and Lian looked up to see a large eagle soaring in the sky. It circled overhead several times before landing in a nearby tree. Its piercing eyes met hers, and for the first time in her life, Lian felt a chill of forewarning. It was as though the world itself was watching her. As the bird took off, soaring toward the mountains, Lian felt an instinctive pull to follow. She knew it was time, but before she could act on her gut feeling, a voice interrupted her thoughts. Lian. The voice was low and commanding. She turned to see General Zarek standing at the edge of the forest, his arms crossed, and his face a mask of disdain. What are you doing out here? You're needed back at the village. We have things to prepare for. Lian stood up, brushing the grass from her hands. I'm not needed there, Zarek. I'm just tending to my friend. Friend? Zarek's laugh was cold. That wolf pup is nothing more than a danger. It's a wild animal, Lian, and you're wasting your time with it. You're meant for more than this. Lian felt a surge of anger, but swallowed it down. She had heard this many times before. The villagers' scorn meant nothing to her now. Fenris was hers to protect, and she would not let anyone take that away from her. I know my place, Zarek, she said quietly, meeting his gaze. And I'll protect Fenris with everything I have. For a moment, Zarek said nothing. His eyes lingered on her, searching for some hint of weakness, but he found none. With a sharp nod, he turned and walked back toward the village. We'll see about that, Omega, he muttered, his voice fading in the distance. Lian watched him leave before turning her attention back to Fenris. The pup was now lying in the sun, its golden fur glowing with health. She knew Zarek wasn't the only one who saw her actions as a threat. The village had always feared the unknown, and the wolf pup was a symbol of that fear. But in Lian's heart, she knew the truth. Fenris was no ordinary wolf, and she had saved it for a reason. As the days passed, Lian's connection to Fenris deepened even further. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Fenris let out a low growl. Lian looked up, startled, as the air around her seemed to shift. The sky darkened, and a cold wind swept through the meadow. Fenris stood on alert, its ears perked, eyes fixed on the distant trees. Something was coming. Lian's heart raced, and she knew this was no ordinary storm. She felt the same pull she had felt earlier with the eagle. Whatever was out there was connected to Fenris, and to her. The night grew darker, and the wind picked up speed. Suddenly, a howl pierced the air. It was a sound unlike any she had ever heard, primal and full of rage. Lian's blood ran cold. She knew that howl. It was the call of the ancient wolves, creatures thought to be extinct for centuries. They had once roamed these lands, but now, only whispers of their power remained. Fenris raised its head, eyes glowing in the dark. Lian stepped back, her mind racing. She had no idea what was happening, but one thing was clear. The ancient wolves had returned, and they were coming for Fenris. She couldn't let that happen, not after everything she had done to save him. With determination in her heart, Lian grabbed Fenris and ran towards the village, hoping to find safety for both of them. She could feel the presence of the ancient wolves growing stronger, their power closing in on her. But even as fear gripped her heart, she knew one thing. Whatever the outcome, she wouldn't let Fenris face it alone. She would stand by his side, no matter what. The wind howled through the trees as Lian ran, her heart pounding in her chest. Fenris was cradled tightly in her arms, its golden fur brushing against her skin as it remained on high alert. The air felt charged, as though the very forest was holding its breath. Lian knew the ancient wolves were close. She could feel their presence, powerful and relentless, closing in on them with each passing second. The howl from earlier echoed again, distant but unmistakable, and it sent a chill down her spine. This was no ordinary creature, no simple pack of wolves. These were the legendary ancient wolves, beings of immense power, believed to be nothing more than a myth. They were said to possess the strength of the earth itself, their howls capable of shaking mountains and stirring storms. And now, they were hunting Fenris. Lian's mind raced. She couldn't fathom why these ancient wolves would be after Fenris. Was it because of the bloodline he carried? Or was there something even more significant about him that she didn't understand? The sky above darkened, the stars hidden behind an impenetrable veil of clouds, and the ground beneath her feet seemed to tremble. Lian pushed herself harder, her legs burning as she ran toward the village. She knew she couldn't outrun the wolves, not with the way the earth seemed to shift beneath her, but she couldn't stop. Not now. Not when Fenris's life was in danger. She burst through the trees and into the clearing where the village lay just ahead. The flickering light from a few distant torches barely illuminated the path ahead, but she didn't hesitate. The ancient wolves were closer than ever, their howls now deafening, and Lian felt a weight pressing down on her chest as she realized they were almost upon her. The wolf pup in her arms growled low, the sound rumbling in its throat as though it was ready to fight back. Lian's heart skipped a beat. She knew that Fenris was no ordinary pup. His bloodline, the power within him, it was all starting to make sense. But she didn't have time to dwell on it now. She needed help. She needed to get to the village and warn the others. She reached the edge of the village just as the first shadow passed over the treetops. Her breath was ragged, her body trembling from the effort, but she didn't stop. She pushed forward, calling out for anyone who might hear her. Help! Someone help! Her voice cracked, panic creeping into her tone. From the shadows, General Zarek appeared, his eyes narrowing as he saw her running toward him with Fenris in her arms. "What are you doing?" he barked, his voice low and stern. "Why are you running like this?" "The ancient wolves," Lian gasped, her words coming out in broken breaths. "They're coming for Fenris. We need to protect him." Zarek looked at her, his expression unreadable. He was silent for a moment, his gaze flickering between Lian and the wolf pup. Finally, he spoke, his tone gruff but with a hint of concern. "Bring him inside. We'll deal with this. Stay close." Lian nodded quickly, not wasting a second. She followed Zarek into the village, her mind spinning with the reality of what was unfolding. The village had always been a place of safety, but now, with the ancient wolves on their heels, it felt like a fragile refuge. As they entered the main hall, Lian could feel the tension in the air. Villagers whispered to each other, their faces pale, their voices shaking with fear. They had heard the howls, too. They knew the legends of the ancient wolves and the terror they could bring. Zarek ordered the doors to be bolted shut, but Lian knew it would take more than a locked door to keep them out. The wolves were relentless, and they wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. "What are we going to do?" Lian asked, her voice trembling as she placed Fenris down on a bed of blankets near the fire. Zarek paced back and forth, his face grim. "We'll prepare. The ancient wolves are known for their power, but we have the advantage of numbers. We'll fight back. We have to." Lian shook her head. "You don't understand. Fenris, he's not like any other wolf. He's the key. They're after him for a reason, and we can't just fight them." Zarek stopped, his eyes locking with hers. "What do you mean?" Lian swallowed hard, her throat dry. "Fenris, he's not just a wolf. He's connected to the power of the forest. The ancient wolves must have sensed it. He's the last of his kind, and they're here to claim him." Zarek stared at her for a long moment, processing her words. Then, without a word, he turned toward the door. "We need to speak with the king," he said, his voice now heavy with urgency. "If what you're saying is true, we'll need his help. This is bigger than any of us." Lian nodded, a sense of dread settling in her stomach. She had no idea what the king would do, but one thing was clear. The battle for Fenris's life was only just beginning, and it would take everything they had to survive the coming storm. As Zarek turned towards the door, his expression was set with determination. Lian could feel the weight of the moment pressing on her chest, each breath coming in sharp, anxious gasps. The ancient wolves were closing in, and no one seemed prepared for what was about to come. She had hoped that the village would be a safe haven, but she had always known that the peace here was fragile at best. Fenris, the wolf she had saved, was more than a mere pup. He was the key to something far greater, something no one could yet fully understand. The villagers gathered around the fire, their faces lit by the flickering glow, casting long shadows on the stone walls. Fear hung in the air like a thick fog. "We need to talk to the king, now," Zarek repeated, his voice firm as he addressed the small crowd in the hall. Lian followed him, her heart pounding in her chest. She could hear the howls of the ancient wolves growing closer, reverberating through the trees like a call to arms. As they made their way toward the royal quarters, Lian's mind raced. What would King Kale say? Would he even believe her? She had no way of knowing, but she couldn't risk Fenris's life on the hope that the king would listen. The path to the palace was quiet, the usual bustle of the village now replaced by an eerie stillness. As they reached the grand hall, Zarek pushed open the heavy doors, and they stepped inside. King Kale was seated on his throne, his sharp eyes glinting in the dim light of the chamber. The room was silent as Lian and Zarek approached, and for a moment, it felt like the world itself had stopped spinning. The king's gaze flickered over them, his expression unreadable. "What is it?" he asked, his voice cold and distant as always. "Your Majesty," Zarek began, his voice steady but urgent. "The situation is more dire than we thought. The ancient wolves have returned, and they are hunting the Omega's wolf pup." King Kale's eyes narrowed, and for the first time since Lian had met him, she saw a flicker of emotion cross his face, something like concern, though it was quickly masked by his usual composure. "The ancient wolves?" he repeated, almost as though testing the words. "You are certain?" Lian stepped forward, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Yes, Your Majesty. They are coming for Fenris. He's not just any wolf. He is the last of his kind, and his bloodline carries the power of the forest. They are after him because of what he represents." The king was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on Lian. She could see the wheels turning in his mind, weighing her words against the gravity of the situation. Finally, he spoke. "And what do you suggest we do?" "We need to protect him," Lian said, her voice firm despite the fear that gripped her. "We cannot let the ancient wolves claim him. If they do, the balance of power in Aldora will shift, and the kingdom will be at risk." King Kale stood slowly, his cloak sweeping the floor as he moved towards them. "And you believe this pup, this creature, is the key to all of this?" he asked, his tone skeptical but not dismissive. Lian nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty. Fenris is more than a mere animal. His bloodline is tied to the magic of this land. If the ancient wolves get their claws on him, they will gain the power to control the forest, and with it, the very fate of Aldora." The room was silent again, the weight of Lian's words settling over them like a heavy cloak. King Kale's face hardened, and for a brief moment, Lian saw the full force of his authority. "We will not let that happen," he said, his voice cold and commanding. "Prepare the kingdom's defenses. We are going to fight." Lian felt a flicker of hope stir in her chest, but it was quickly overshadowed by the realization of just how much was at stake. This was not just a fight for Fenris's life. It was a battle for the kingdom itself. Zarek nodded, turning to leave the room and begin preparations. "We will need the village's help," he said. "Gather the warriors and the mages. We are going to need all the strength we can muster." Lian watched him go, her heart heavy with the weight of what was to come. The king's resolve was clear, but she knew the battle ahead would not be easy. She turned back to Fenris, who was now resting near the fire. The pup's eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, as though it knew the storm that was brewing around them. The ancient wolves were coming, and the only way to protect Fenris and the kingdom was to fight back with everything they had. Lian felt a rush of determination flood through her. She would stand by Fenris, no matter what. Together, they would face the coming storm, and together, they would fight to protect the future of Aldora. The night had fallen, and the air in the village was thick with tension. The villagers worked tirelessly, preparing for the coming battle. Torches were lit along the walls, their flickering light casting eerie shadows across the cobblestone streets. Lian stood by the fire, her eyes focused on Fenris, who lay quietly beside her. The pup's golden fur glowed faintly in the dim light, but his usual playfulness had faded. He seemed to sense the looming danger, and Lian could feel the unease radiating from him. The ancient wolves were coming, and the village was their target. In the distance, she could hear the sounds of warriors preparing, sharpening their weapons, and organizing into squads. Zarek had left to rally the villagers and the mages. Word of the threat had spread quickly, and now the village was united in a common cause, to protect Fenris and their kingdom. As Lian sat next to Fenris, her thoughts raced. She had known from the moment she saved the pup that he was special, but she never imagined the danger he would bring. The ancient wolves, creatures of legend, were now a terrifying reality, and they were coming for him. She couldn't let that happen. Fenris's life, and the future of Aldora, depended on it. A rustle in the trees caught her attention. She turned, and there, standing at the edge of the clearing, was King Kale. His cloak billowed in the wind, and his eyes, sharp and calculating, locked onto her. "Lian," he said, his voice low but steady. "We've prepared everything. The warriors are in position, and the mages are ready. The village stands with you, and we will fight to protect Fenris." Lian nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had feared the king would see Fenris as nothing more than a threat, but his support was a sign of hope. "Thank you, Your Majesty," she said softly. "We can't afford to lose him. The ancient wolves won't stop until they have him. We need to fight back, but we also need to keep Fenris safe." King Kale's eyes softened, just for a moment. "We will protect him. We'll make sure the wolves don't get close." Lian stood up, looking out toward the darkened forest. The howls of the ancient wolves echoed in the distance, growing louder with each passing minute. It wouldn't be long now. "Is everyone ready?" she asked, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "We're ready," King Kale replied. "We've set up defenses around the village. The warriors will hold the front lines, and the mages will work their magic to fend off the wolves. But we need to keep Fenris hidden, keep him safe. If they find him, it's over." Lian's eyes flicked to Fenris, who was still lying by the fire, his eyes closed but his ears twitching at every sound. "We can't let them find him," she said, her voice firm. "He's the key to everything. We can't afford to lose him." Just as she spoke, a shadow moved across the clearing. It was Zarek, returning with the first group of warriors. They were dressed in their battle gear, weapons at the ready. Zarek's face was hard, his jaw clenched in determination. "We're ready," he said, his voice low. "The wolves are close. We'll need to move quickly." Lian nodded and took a deep breath, her heart pounding. She had never been a fighter. She was an Omega, trained to heal and protect, not to fight. But this wasn't just any fight. This was the fight for Fenris's life, and for the future of Aldora. "We'll fight with everything we have," she said, her voice strong. "But Fenris stays hidden. No one can know where he is. If they find him, the battle is lost." Zarek nodded, his eyes meeting hers with a look of understanding. "We won't let that happen," he said. "We'll keep him safe." The warriors gathered around, forming a protective circle around the village. The mages took their places, ready to cast protective spells and ward off the ancient wolves. The wind had picked up, and the air was thick with the scent of the coming storm. It was only a matter of time before the wolves arrived. Lian could feel the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. She had never been in a battle before, but she knew this one was different. This was the moment when everything would change. The howl of the ancient wolves echoed through the trees, closer now, their ominous presence sending a shiver down her spine. "They're here," King Kale said, his voice steady but filled with a quiet resolve. "It's time." Lian took one last look at Fenris, her heart aching at the thought of what might come. She knew the battle ahead would be fierce, but she would fight for him, for Aldora, for everything she held dear. Together, they would face the storm, and together, they would protect their future. The first howl of the ancient wolves pierced through the stillness of the night, sending a tremor through the village. It was a sound unlike anything Lian had ever heard before, primal and full of rage, echoing from deep within the forest. She felt it vibrate in her chest, a cold warning that the battle was about to begin. Her heart raced as she turned to look at the warriors, their faces set with grim determination, ready for whatever was coming. King Kale stood tall at the front, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, his eyes fixed on the dark horizon. The wind picked up, whipping through the trees and carrying with it the scent of danger. Lian's gaze flickered to Fenris, still hidden in the small, protected area by the fire. The pup's eyes glowed faintly, and she could see the tension in his small frame. He knew, too. He knew the storm that was approaching, and yet, he remained calm, trusting in her to keep him safe. "They're almost here." Zarek's voice was low, but firm as he approached Lian, his armor clinking with every movement. "We have to be ready." "We are," Lian said, trying to steady her breath. She wasn't a warrior, but she knew that this moment would determine the future of her kingdom, and it wasn't just her life on the line. It was Fenris's, and everything that Aldora stood for. "What about the village?" she asked, her voice filled with worry. "We've set up defenses around the perimeter," Zarek replied. "The warriors are stationed at key points. The mages will cast protective wards to keep the wolves from getting too close. But the ancient wolves," he paused, his gaze darkening. "They're unlike anything we've faced before. Their power is beyond anything we can imagine. Lian swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words. And Fenris? Fenris is the key, Zarek said, his voice grave. If they find him, if they take him, it will be the end of everything. We have to keep him hidden, no matter what. Lian nodded, turning back to the fire. Fenris was still there, watching her with his luminous eyes, the glow of the fire dancing in his fur. She could feel the pull between them, the bond that had formed ever since she saved him. She knew that he was more than just a wolf, but the weight of his importance was becoming clearer with every passing moment. The howl rang out again, louder this time, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps through the trees. The wolves were near. Lian could feel the tension building, the air thick with anticipation. The warriors tensed, their swords and spears ready. The mages stood in a circle, their hands raised, murmuring incantations under their breath as they prepared their magic. King Kale's voice rang out, strong and steady, cutting through the chaos. Hold the line. Do not let them breach the village. Protect the pup at all costs. With that, the first of the ancient wolves appeared, their massive forms emerging from the trees. Their eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and their growl sent a shiver through Lian's spine. These were not ordinary wolves. They were creatures of legend, their power radiating with every step they took. The warriors moved into position, forming a protective barrier around the village. Arrows flew from the archers stationed in the trees, but the wolves dodged them with ease, their movements swift and graceful. The mages cast their spells, creating barriers of light to fend off the advancing creatures, but the wolves seemed unaffected, their eyes burning with fury. Stay back, Zarek shouted to Lian, his voice commanding. Do not approach them. They're too powerful. But Lian's heart was pounding in her chest. She couldn't just stand by and watch. She couldn't let them harm Fenris or the kingdom. She turned to look at the pup again, his eyes locked with hers, and she felt the bond between them strengthen. Fenris was more than just a creature of the forest. He was the key to their survival. The howl of the wolves grew louder, and with a surge of adrenaline, Lian made her decision. She would not hide. She would not let Fenris face this alone. We fight, she shouted, her voice filled with determination. The warriors looked at her, surprised, but Zarek's eyes met hers, and he gave a sharp nod. If you're with us, then stay close, he said, his tone steady. Lian grabbed a sword from one of the warriors, feeling its weight in her hand. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The battle had begun, and there was no turning back now. The first of the ancient wolves lunged at the warriors, its massive jaws snapping shut inches from one of the fighters. A warrior swung his sword, but the wolf dodged effortlessly, its claws raking across his armor. The warriors fought bravely, but the wolves were relentless, their strength and speed unmatched. Lian could see the desperation in their eyes as they struggled to keep the wolves at bay. But the tide was turning. The wolves were pushing forward, their power overwhelming the village's defenses. Lian's heart pounded as she watched, knowing that they were on the brink of losing everything. But she wouldn't let that happen. Not while Fenris was still alive, and not while there was a chance to save the kingdom. With a cry of determination, Lian rushed forward, her sword raised. This was her fight now, and she would not let fear control her. She would stand with Fenris, and together, they would face the storm. The battle raged on with a ferocity Lian had never experienced before. The ancient wolves were everywhere, their massive forms leaping over barriers, tearing through the warriors' defenses with ease. Their glowing eyes pierced through the darkness, their growls filling the air as the earth trembled beneath their paws. Lian gripped the sword tightly in her hands, her heart pounding in her chest as she fought beside the warriors. The villagers, though outnumbered and outmatched, held their ground, desperate to protect their home, but it was clear that the ancient wolves were no ordinary adversaries. Their strength, speed, and magical aura made them nearly unstoppable. Lian's eyes darted around the battlefield, watching as warriors clashed with the wolves, their swords cutting through the air, but the wolves dodged and retaliated with vicious precision. One wolf leapt toward a group of archers, knocking them to the ground with a single swipe of its paw. Lian saw the desperation in the faces of the villagers and knew they couldn't keep up much longer. She had to get to Fenris. He was the only hope they had left. With a surge of determination, Lian pushed forward, weaving her way through the chaos of the battlefield, her eyes locked on the small, protected area where Fenris lay hidden. She could hear his faint growls, as if he sensed the impending danger. The closer she got to the fire, the more the howls of the wolves seemed to grow louder, the pressure in the air thickening. As she reached the small clearing where Fenris had been kept safe, her heart sank. The protective circle around him had been breached. A massive wolf, larger than any she had seen, stood over Fenris, its glowing eyes locked onto the pup. Fenris stood his ground, his fur bristling with energy, but the ancient wolf towered over him, its power radiating like an unrelenting storm. Without thinking, Lian rushed forward, her sword raised. "No," she shouted, her voice trembling with fear and determination. The ancient wolf turned toward her, its eyes burning with malevolent energy. It growled, a low, rumbling sound that sent a chill down Lian's spine. She could feel the weight of its gaze, the sheer power of the beast. But she couldn't stop. Fenris needed her, and she would not let this beast harm him. With a swift motion, Lian lunged forward, striking at the wolf's flank. The blade made contact, but the wolf barely flinched, its hide as tough as stone. The creature bared its teeth, snarling as it swiped at her with deadly claws. Lian barely managed to dodge, the claws grazing her arm as she twisted out of the way. Pain shot through her body, but she gritted her teeth and held her ground. Fenris let out a fierce growl, stepping forward to protect Lian, his eyes glowing with an intense light. The wolf hesitated for a split second, but that was enough. Lian seized the opportunity. She darted forward once more, her sword aimed at the creature's throat. This time, she struck true. The wolf howled in agony as the blade sank deep into its flesh. It staggered back, its massive form crashing to the ground with a thunderous impact. The battle paused for a moment as the other wolves turned to watch. The air was thick with tension, and Lian's heart raced as she turned toward Fenris. He stood tall, his golden fur glowing brighter than ever, and she could see the spark of power in his eyes. He was no ordinary pup. He was a force to be reckoned with, and she had just witnessed it for herself. The ancient wolves, watching their fallen comrade, hesitated. They knew the power Fenris held, and for a moment, they seemed to reconsider their approach. Lian breathed heavily, her heart pounding in her chest. This was her chance. She stepped back, keeping her eyes locked on Fenris as the pup slowly advanced toward the remaining wolves. The other wolves circled around, growling and snapping, but they did not attack. Fenris let out a deep, resonating howl, his voice echoing through the forest, and for a moment, the ground beneath their feet seemed to tremble. The ancient wolves stopped, their heads tilting in curiosity as they looked at Fenris. His power was undeniable. Lian felt it in the air, the energy that seemed to pulse around him. This was why they had come for him. He was not just the last of his kind. He was the key to the ancient magic that coursed through the land. The remaining wolves growled softly, their eyes narrowing, but they did not approach. Fenris, now standing proud and tall, locked eyes with the lead wolf. For a moment, there was an unspoken understanding between them. The lead wolf, once filled with rage, now seemed to hesitate, its posture shifting from one of aggression to one of cautious respect. The standoff continued for what felt like an eternity, the tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Then, with a final, reluctant glance toward Fenris, the ancient wolves turned and disappeared into the forest, leaving the village in silence. Lian, breathless and covered in sweat, lowered her sword, her eyes fixed on Fenris. The pup, still glowing with power, slowly padded over to her side, his gaze never leaving the trees where the wolves had vanished. The battle was over, for now, but Lian knew it was only the beginning. The ancient wolves would return, and they would fight again. And the next time, it would be for everything. But for now, Fenris was safe, and so was Aldora. The village was eerily quiet after the battle, the tension still hanging thick in the air as the last remnants of the ancient wolves disappeared into the forest. Lian stood in the center of the clearing, her breath shallow and ragged as she looked around at the warriors who were slowly beginning to regroup. The battle had been brutal, but against all odds, they had managed to push back the wolves, for now. The warriors were tending to the wounded, and the mages were weaving protective spells to ensure that the village remained safe. Yet, despite the immediate relief, Lian knew that the fight was far from over. The ancient wolves would return. It wasn't a matter of if, but when. Lian turned toward Fenris, who was now sitting calmly at her side. His golden fur had lost some of its shine, but the power in his eyes had not wavered. He looked at her with a quiet intensity, as if he understood the gravity of what had just happened. Lian reached out and gently stroked his fur, feeling the warmth of his body under her hand. The bond between them had only deepened during the fight. He was not just a wolf. He was a symbol of hope, a key to something far greater than either of them could fully comprehend. "You saved us," Lian whispered, her voice filled with gratitude and awe. Fenris tilted his head, his eyes meeting hers with an understanding that transcended words. For a moment, the weight of the world seemed to fall away, and Lian felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that no matter how dangerous the future might be, she wouldn't face it alone. As she stood there, lost in the moment, Zarek approached her, his armor scratched and dented from the battle, his face grim. "We need to speak," he said, his voice low. Lian nodded, following him to the edge of the village, where the firelight flickered faintly in the distance. The mages were still working on the wards, ensuring that no further threats would come through the night. Zarek looked at her with a mixture of respect and concern. "You did well today," he said, his tone softening. "But we both know this is far from over. The ancient wolves are not like anything we've faced before. They won't stop until they get what they want, and that's Fenris." Lian's stomach tightened at his words, but she nodded. "I know," she said, her voice steady. "But we can't keep running, Zarek. Fenris is the key, and we have to protect him, not just from the wolves, but from whatever else is coming." Zarek's eyes met hers, the weight of the situation settling between them. "You're right," he said slowly. "Fenris is more than just a creature. He's the last of his kind, and if they take him, it could mean the end of Aldora. We can't afford to lose him." Lian felt the full weight of his words, but she refused to let fear take over. She had already made her decision. She would protect Fenris, no matter the cost. "We won't lose him," Lian said, her voice firm, her resolve unwavering. "We need to find a way to stop them, to find out why they're after him, and how we can stop the cycle before it starts again." Zarek nodded. "We'll find a way. But first, we need to prepare. The wolves will be back, and when they do, we need to be ready." Lian looked back toward Fenris, who was now standing, his eyes locked on the horizon. He seemed to sense something, a shift in the air, the quiet before another storm. The weight of the prophecy, of the ancient wolves, and of the role she and Fenris would play in the fate of Aldora, all pressed down on her like an unbearable weight. But there was one thing she knew for certain. No matter what happened, she would fight. She would fight for Fenris, for her people, and for a future where Aldora could live in peace. "We'll prepare," Lian said, her voice steady. "And we'll fight. Together." The wind picked up again, swirling around them, as though carrying the weight of the world on its shoulders. Lian turned back to Zarek, her eyes filled with determination. "The battle today was just the beginning. We need to know everything about the ancient wolves, what they want, why they've come, and how we can stop them." Zarek's gaze softened as he looked at her. "We'll gather everything we can, every scrap of knowledge. And when the time comes, we'll be ready." Lian nodded, turning to look at Fenris once more. The pup was no longer just a symbol of hope. He was the key to everything. The future of Aldora rested on their shoulders, and together, they would face the storm ahead. The winds howled in the distance, a reminder of the battles yet to come, but Lian knew one thing for sure. She wasn't afraid. As long as Fenris was by her side, she would never be afraid again. The days that followed were filled with preparation. The warriors of Aldora fortified the village, reinforcing every wall and securing the perimeter. The mages worked tirelessly to strengthen the wards and protective spells, ensuring that the village would stand strong against whatever the ancient wolves had in store. But no matter how much they prepared, Lian knew it wouldn't be enough. The ancient wolves had tasted their power, and they wouldn't be satisfied until they had what they wanted, Fenris. Lian spent every moment with him, watching over him, protecting him as best as she could. He was still the same pup she had found in the forest, but now he carried the weight of something much greater. The magic within him had awakened, and it was clear to Lian that Fenris was no longer just a creature of the forest. He was a force to be reckoned with, and the ancient wolves knew it. One evening, As the sun dipped below the horizon, Lian stood on the walls of the village, gazing out into the forest. The wind was still, almost unnatural in its calmness. She could feel the weight of the coming storm, the sense of something powerful and ancient moving just beyond the trees. She had to find a way to end this, to stop the wolves before they could take Fenris and destroy everything they had fought to protect. It was then that she heard a soft, almost imperceptible growl behind her. She turned to see Fenris standing at her side, his eyes glowing in the fading light. He had grown stronger over the past few days, his body more solid, his presence more commanding. He had always been different, but now, he was something more. "Fenris," Lian said softly, her voice full of emotion. "You've become more than I ever imagined. You're not just a wolf. You're the future of this kingdom." Fenris turned his head toward her, his golden eyes locking with hers. It was as if he understood, as if he knew the weight of her words. He let out a low growl, almost as if to affirm her statement. For a moment, Lian stood there, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and fear. She had saved him, but in doing so, she had unknowingly set into motion a chain of events that could either save or destroy everything she held dear. "I won't let them take you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "No matter what happens, we'll face it together." Fenris let out a soft whine, nuzzling her hand in reassurance. They were in this together, and nothing would break the bond they shared. That night, as the village settled into uneasy rest, Lian lay awake, her thoughts swirling. She had never felt more connected to Fenris, and yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The ancient wolves would not wait forever. She had to find a way to stop them, once and for all. Early the next morning, Zarek arrived at Lian's door. His face was grim, but there was something in his eyes, a glimmer of hope. "We found something," he said, his voice low. "A way to end this, once and for all." Lian stood quickly, her heart pounding in her chest. "What is it?" she asked, her voice breathless. Zarek hesitated for a moment, then nodded toward the map of Aldora spread across the table. "We've found an ancient temple, deep in the heart of the forest," he said. "It's said to hold the answers to the magic of the wolves, the magic that Fenris is connected to. If we can get there before the wolves do, we might be able to unlock the power to stop them." Lian's heart skipped a beat. A temple, the key to everything. "When do we leave?" she asked, her voice firm with resolve. "As soon as possible," Zarek replied. "We don't have much time." They gathered their supplies quickly, and with Fenris by her side, Lian followed Zarek and the warriors into the heart of the forest. The air grew colder as they ventured deeper into the woods, the trees towering above them like silent sentinels. The further they went, the more the forest seemed to come alive, the magic in the air thickening with every step. Lian could feel it, the same energy that she had felt when Fenris had first healed under her hands. It was the magic of the ancient wolves, the magic of the land itself. As they neared the temple, the air grew even heavier, the weight of centuries pressing down on them. The temple was hidden beneath a canopy of ancient trees, its stone pillars covered in ivy, its entrance guarded by thick roots that twisted like serpents. It looked ancient, forgotten, but Lian could feel the power emanating from it. This was it, the place where it all began, where the magic of Fenris and the ancient wolves had first come into being. With a deep breath, Lian stepped forward, her hand resting on Fenris's back. They had come so far, and now it was time to put an end to this. The temple doors creaked open, revealing the darkened interior. "Stay close," Zarek warned, his voice tense. "Whatever lies inside, we need to be ready." Lian nodded, her eyes steely with determination. This was the final step. The ancient wolves would not win. She would stop them, for Fenris, for Aldora, and for the future. Together, they would face the storm and bring peace to their world.